You know, it's often been said in the debate against violence in media. We've asked the question, or been asked the question, how much are we going to take? How much longer are we going to stand by when we know the cause of these massacres? And how much longer are we going to allow these profiteers to indoctrinate our children into thinking that violence is the answer? Even though, what was that we usually say when kids are bullied? Oh, right, that they should go after those bullies, stand up for themselves because violence isn't the answer until it's the answer because, yeah, because that works out so well. It's not like those who stand up to their bullies after years and years of bullying get a free pass. No, sometimes the bullies just keep coming back harder, and on top of that, the person who fought back gets in trouble, not the bullies. Wonderful how this works, isn't it? But no, now it's time for me. It's time for me to stand up and say, I've been talking and talking and talking about societal ills. I've been demonstrating through science, through studies, through statistics, through longitudinal studies, through causation studies, through from expert to expert to expert, how and why we are hurting ourselves in this society, oftentimes creating the very monsters that we despise. I've laid it out for you. I have damn near done it phonetically. And yet, I'm still met with resistance by people who seem to feel that things are hunky-dory. It's not society that needs to change, it's us, especially those of us who lust for violence porn and all those other types of terms that people put out there. You have no evidence. You have what? Studies from 50 years ago? Or maybe even sooner than that? I've got studies from right now. I've even got studies going back 10 years ago to start to show that Bandura is not a god. That Bandura was very flawed, had very problematic research that people generally don't like to talk about because they want somebody in their corner to say, this is where it started, and this is what we're continually trying to reproduce, though they can't, and continually trying to prove there's a link to. We're throwing billions, billions with a B of dollars into research to try to prove Bandura right. And what we're finding is that Bandura was not correct. He wasn't even beginning to be correct in his assertions, in his research, in his methodology, and yet he is constantly held up as the benchmark proof and proof positive that violent media begets violent society, begets violent people. And when that doesn't work, the excuses come out. So while you're throwing money at stuff that isn't provable, stuff that isn't working, while you are wasting valuable research time on things that have been thoroughly debunked and have about 1,000 causes, none of which have to do with the amount of or lack thereof of consumption of media of any types. While you're doing that, people are still getting hurt. If anything, it's almost getting worse, though in some cases I've already absolved you because it's more epigenetic than it is environmental in many ways. Though we have a lot of broken people who become broken parents who then go on to break people who with each with each next generation that comes after it is becoming worse and worse as well because the epigenetics starts to catch up with the bad home environment, the abusive parenting that we seem so adamant about protecting our right to be abusive parents. That you're spending tax dollars to have parents like me who actually give a darn, who are actually spending every waking day of our day taking care of our kid and making sure that our kid is not going to become a bad seed, that they are going to become a successful person in society. No, you'd rather that CPS was at my doorstep and not at the doorstep of the person down the lane, fictitiously speaking, who thinks that an oven is a viable device for punishing children. And no, I'm not talking about what some consider innocuous, turn on the burner, put the kid's hand on it, let them feel that it's hot, and they'll never do it again. I mean forcing your child into the oven, turning it on until you feel that they have learned their lesson. And that's not even the bottom of the barrel of people who slip through the cracks, who we only get to them and to their children when typically their children are either severely broken or are dead. And yet, no, you got to be at my doorstep because I'm the threat to society, right? I'm the person who is the cause of all your ills. And if I would just go away or die, or preferably both, along with the fruit of my loins, then this world would be a better place. We could all sing kumbaya, kumbaya, right? How much more are you willing to take before you're willing to take a look at the data? Before you're willing to pull back the veil of ignorance and say, oh, you mean this does have an actual measurable and demonstratable cause? And we can actually do something about it, starting with this generation and moving forward. And we can actually remove things from our environment that might cause an otherwise normal person who's developing to not develop into a criminal. How much longer do we have to perpetually create situations that are full self-fulfilling prophecies that science can show with almost 99% certainty that certain cataclysms will happen because they've happened before, because they've been a measurable force, and we're actually finding actual causes instead of blaming everything except for what's actually at fault? How much longer are you just going to settle for comforting lies instead of the uncomfortable truth? How much harder do we have to make it for future generations to clean up our mess before we say, I'm done, I'm sorry, this isn't working? We could have a better standard of lives for ourselves, but more importantly, we could have it for our children or our children's children or their children. Right now, what prospects do they have? What are they inheriting outside of our genes and our bad situations and our ability to look past the actual causes and blame everything that isn't associated with what's going on? And are they going to inherit our blind faith that somehow everything will work out in the future? That all this too shall pass, and as long as we just bury our heads in the sand, this will pass and we'll be fine. That's not good enough. That's not nearly good enough. And if you do believe that, you should be embarrassed, because I am embarrassed for you. But now maybe you can see why I need to be here, why myself and my cohorts who advocate for these things through science, reasoning, logic, studies, all the things that we can bring to the table, why we matter. The world of tomorrow can have your religion. I'm not going to dismantle it. I'm not going to call for dismantling it, because a lot of you are responsible theists. And if that's the only reason why you're afraid to take the necessary steps to fix this, then you need to stop. You need to realize that you're afraid of nothing. That often a lot of what you're afraid of is absolutely nothing. You can have what comforts you most, but you can also have a society that works, not a society that is built off of comfortable lies instead of seeing it for the uncomfortable truths that are here now. Just some food for thought. I would hope that you would just please consider what I've said. Thank you.